some ground to cover today. We've got a couple of great guests, a couple of guys that I think you're going to enjoy hearing from, and I want to introduce you to them. So first, he's been in the live entertainment industry for more than 25 years, touring the world for so many different shows. 5 years at the Admission Ticket Network, which is now part of Ticketmaster Canada, and then he ran away with the circus, literally spent 16 years with Cirque du Soleil, ticket sales director on tour for Cirque's many world touring properties. And in 2018, left Cirque to become a consultant for all kinds of touring properties. There was the Apollo 11 show, other great stuff. And then co-founded a company with the MTA group called Tic Tac Ticks in Montreal, a ticketing services company. Everybody please welcome Eric Valli.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here.
How's it going, Eric?
It's going very well.
I was complimenting Eric earlier on his beard.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, staying at home lets you go loose a little bit.
That's right.
Hair, beard.
Hey, no one's looking anyway, right? Except today, when everyone's looking.
Except today, right.
Also, returning guest and one of our favorite guests on this chat is a professor of microbiology and immunology in the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia University. He's done lab research on viruses since 1975, specifically influenza viruses, and he writes a popular virology blog and podcasts about virology. He's known as Earth's virologist. He is Dr. Vincent Raccaniello. Dr. Raccaniello, welcome back. Thank you for coming.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. When last we spoke, I think it was May. I think the last time we had you on was May. And we've come some ways since then in terms of where all this has gone.
We have not the way we envisioned, but we've come some way.
Of course, our focus is always to talk through the issue of getting back into the venues, safely hosting shows again, that kind of thing. And what I like to always have is somebody from the side of the business like Eric, who is very versed with the issues that are all about getting shows going and running them and hosting people safely and happily, and someone with another form of expertise. In this case, I thought it was good to come back to the virology aspect because we sort of thought we were able to maybe move away from that for a little while and we'll find ourselves back in that situation. So I think you guys are going to be a perfect combination of expertise. For those of you who are listening, I really do think this is a great opportunity both to ask Eric and Dr. Vincent questions that are on your mind about reopening, because you've got somebody with expertise in touring and making shows happen of almost unprecedented amount in the person of Eric. And then with Dr. Vincent, you've got somebody who knows a lot about the thing that we're all going through, which is the pandemic. So do feel free in chat, or I think either one, we'll find your questions in either chat or Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And if it's something that you want to everybody to hear in chat, make sure you set your chat function to all panelists and attendees, and then everybody will be able to see it. So I want to do something just to warm people up, which is this. I don't know where everybody's coming from right now, where they're listening right now. So go into your chat window right now, select all panelists and attendees, and I just want you to type in where you are right now, what city in the world you are in right now. So I just want to sort of get Oceanside, Washington, Boston, the Villages, which is in Florida, San Jose, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Philly, Pasadena, nice, me too, Chicago, Phoenix, Oakland, Pittsburgh, Silver Springs, Maryland, Sherman Oaks, Las Vegas, Canton, Ohio, I can't even keep up, New York, Palm Desert, California, Chicago, Fort Worth, Alexandria, Torrance, the Bronx, Miami, New York City, Dallas, Astoria, Valparaiso, Indiana, Walnut Creek, Richardson. There's people coming from all over the country. You didn't get a lot of Canadians on. Where's the Canadians today, Eric?
I guess I'm the only Canadian on board.
Is there anybody in Canada out there? I don't know. That's disappointing. I thought we were going to pull in the Canadian audience today with Eric on the so awesome. Oh, I see. So Jason Varnish says he's the home of the Eric Valli fan club, which is in Pittsburgh apparently. So if I need to mail my renewal certificate or my renewal payment to the Eric Valli fan club, I know it's got to go to Pittsburgh now. So that's good. Good to know that. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to do is review our consumer sentiment data. For those of you who have been here before, you know how this works. We poll a large chunk of the Gold Star member base, which is a broad-based group of live entertainment consumers, twice a month, and we ask them essentially the same questions over and over and over and over again. I think this is the sixth this is the sixth version of the survey that we've done over the last 3 months, and then we're tracking how they feel about going out. So I'm going to run through that. Vincent, Eric, feel free to chime in whenever you want. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to try to pick the right screen so that you don't see my fantasy football scores or anything like that. All right, here we go. I don't play fantasy football. Okay, so this is from this data wrapped up last week. So early July is when this is collected. We have 2 goals for this project that I like to review at the beginning of every time we do this, which is to get an ongoing pulse on the sentiments of the event going public. You know, it's funny, every now and then I'll see a survey about this same kind of thing, and then I'll see the date that the information was collected was you know, late May or something, and I go like, who cares, right? Like every week is just like a dramatic twist and turn these days. So it really feels important for us to keep up with this. And then of course, you know, to share the information with all of you Gold Star event partners and really anybody in the industry or anybody who cares to know, because we want to get back to live events as soon as we can, but we really have to understand that even if it's legal, even if we can open or whatever, it depends a lot on how people feel as to whether they actually come back. And so that's part of it. A few things about this survey just to understand. We've been doing this twice a month since early May. We want to see trends. We want to see where things are going. We talk to people in, by name, we talk to people in 17 major metros and of all ages. So we have a large number of people from under 25 to over 65, and we break it up, everybody in between in metros. And generally speaking, these are people that are, that really do go out. They're sort of the core of our business. As everybody who's in the business knows, we rely on the people who go out, you know, more than once or twice a year to make the business work. And we tend to get a very large result, which means that even when we break it down by metro or age or whatever, we still have a lot of people in the sample. So we had 4,115 respondents in this survey this time. So we consistently are having a good large sample, which gives the more validity and smaller margin of error to the results. So the first question we always ask is, and we give you a slider bar from 0 to 100 to answer. We get, if you take the survey, you can actually move the little thing across the page. We ask you, if you could, if they were legal, if they were happening in your area right now, how interested, how willing would you be to go out to live events? Where 0 is NFW, 100 is like, there's no way to stop me, and 50 is sort of in between. And our number for this, well, actually, Eric, Vincent, guesses? Anybody want to guess?
30%.
30. Eric? You
34.
32. So we lost a little ground. The last survey was 36 and we lost ground. This is the lowest number that we've seen so far. This is the lowest. This is lower than the number we saw at the beginning of May.
Not surprising given the recent explosion in cases, right?
Yeah. I'm not surprised at all. I was actually braced for an even lower number when we were collecting this data.
I'm wondering what the 32% are thinking. That's really my curiosity, because this is a number we're going to see again and again.
Yeah, I mean, so here's somebody actually. I'm sorry, it slipped my mind who made this request, but whoever made this request, we did it, which is cool. Somebody made the request that we actually break this down a little bit, because 32 is actually an average, right? So you ask 4,100 people what their number is. 32 is an average, but it's not necessarily you know, the mode or the typical answer. So we actually broke it down into well, let me do the trend first, just so trend. So you can see that it was as high in mid-June, it was as high as 43, and then has come down to its lowest point yet, which is a little bit of a bummer, but not, as you say, not surprising.
It is not surprising, given the circumstances, given the reports coming in every day.
Yeah.
You know, people thought it would be over end of June and cases seemed to go down. New York was doing better, but now the entire South, cases are beating records every day. So I'm not surprised people have something else on their mind and going to attend a live event.
Yep. So this next slide tells us a little bit of a different, gives us a little different picture from the average. Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing metros first. We'll get to that. Okay, so we break it down by metro areas, and we'll start with Las Vegas, which I continue. Last time this number was something like 66 in Las Vegas, which I thought was insane. 52 is probably pretty insane as well, but it's certainly the outlier to the high side. We had a question about the size of the sample in these metros, and it is true that with some of the smaller cities like Sacramento, the sample is smaller, but it's still large enough. It's still at least 50 to 100 respondents in each one of these cities. So that's large enough that your margin for error is only 2-3 points. So these are all still good numbers. 52, 40, 41 in Sacramento. And then you get to this cluster of cities in the mid 30s, New York, Chicago, every place that isn't in the 17 metros that we name. Dallas, which was at a sort of 50 point or so number about a month ago, down at 33. LA, which had been in the low 40s for a long time, at 33. San Diego, 33. Phoenix, 32. Phoenix had actually been one of the higher ones, and as things have reversed themselves there. And then as you move down, Atlanta, which was one of the more optimistic cities, has come down to 31. Houston, which also was in the mid 50s, 2 or 3 surveys ago, is all the way down at 30. Philly at 29, San Jose 28, Seattle 28, San Francisco 28. Those are all lows for the survey for those cities. Boston at 27, Miami 26, and as usual, Washington D.C. is our lowest one at 24. Thoughts, comments?
Miami's not surprising because they have a lot of cases there. But Las Vegas is interesting because Nevada's been relatively spared, so that's probably why that's so high.
I saw that the data is worsening there though now. I'm not sure if it's going to continue that way, but
I mean the 14-day trend is rising, but there's not a lot of cases. I mean we're talking less than 100 cases per 100,000, so that's probably why. Either that or they're in another world and they don't know what's going on.
When you go to the casino, you don't know what time of day it is. You don't know anything.
It seems from last time, all the cities have gone down except New York and Boston, which are at the same score. But everything else has gone down. But they're all new hotspots. It's not a surreal thing which you can't grasp now. It's coming in people's neighborhoods and people's cities, and I think it's becoming more real.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at the breakdown finally. Even though so this is like a histogram of people's answers. So as we said, the average is in the 30s, but you can see that it's not a sort of it doesn't cluster around the average. You have a lot of people in the no way category down here in the 0 to 10. In fact, that's not the majority, but it's the plurality of people are in that category. And you have this other large category on the right of people who are just fine, right? They're like, let me go at it if I can. And actually the decile with the average in it is actually not one of the more popular ones. There's people all around it. I think this shows us a sort of different picture when you look at it this way.
All your markets together, all lumped together now?
What's that?
These are all the markets together, right?
Yeah, this is not by metro. This is just breaking it down. And someone asked for this, and I thought it was a good idea, for a look at it, not on the average, but in groups, in bins of where people's answers really were. So a whole bunch of people in the low end. And
it's surprising to see so many 91, 100.
Yeah.
I think they're denying what's happening, or but I mean, I also understand I miss it, but to which point do we miss it to jeopardize your own self?
So the 1 to 10 is really important because that's totally lost in your averages, I think, and it really shows that most people are not ready, and I think that's a good sign because that's the way it should be.
Yeah, it is. That is what there's the old joke, about drowning in a river whose average depth was 3 feet.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that. Yeah, I mean, it really does. I mean, there's an actual dip around the average in terms of the number of people who are in that zone, but obviously That's where it ends up being an average. So I thought this was a good request, and I'm glad we were able to do it. We'll keep reporting it this way as well, just so people can see the contour of it. It does.
The thing, Jim, I wonder is that between 11 and 100, I mean, many of them are 300 something, right? And
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
wonder if there's really any difference among any of those. And why would 81 to 90 be 100 versus 400? So I think basically they're all the same, say 350, 400 people, except for 1 to 10. That's how I would read it.
The other part that I'm wondering about as well is, we're talking really health-wise pandemic, but the pandemic also is starting to hurt people on a monetary aspect. So I'm also wondering if some people are starting to tune out because of financial issues, or and that may be a problem even when things do reopen. What's the percentage of people of event goers that would typically go that will still be able to afford it in the short, mid, long term?
Right. All right, let's press on. We also ask, and we kind of get the same result every time. We ask, how does the venue size matter? And what we learned really early on was that the answer to the overall question is the small venue answer. So we say, okay, what about in a small venue? And it's really the same number as the overall number. Medium venues get smaller, and large venues it gets even smaller. And these are the lowest numbers for all three of those levels: 22 on medium venues and 17. I don't think there's anything surprising there, but you guys may. Okay. As we know, age is a really important factor in all this, and so we break out the data as well by age groups overall. People 35 and under, probably unsurprisingly, have the highest average at 38, and then middle-aged people at 35. And those two numbers have actually been really close throughout this. There's some difference. Actually, there was one survey where the middle-age average was actually higher than the 35 and under average. I don't know, but generally it's been like this, where the younger folks are just a little higher than middle-aged people, and that actually didn't show any change. You can see that 35 to 65 dropped 5, and then the 65 and up down to 25, which is the lowest number that we've seen so far from that group.
Yeah, not surprised there. I mean, the focus of the whole pandemic has been put a lot on how it impacts more elderly people, so I'm not surprised to see that distribution there.
Is this more or less similar to your previous polls, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, just going down. The whole thing is ratcheting down.
Yeah.
And then when you cross tab, I hated to even do it this time. If you cross tab 65 and up with large venue, I think the number was like 8. Basically everybody in that 1 to 10 bin virtually. So let's see. We actually add a little bit to this to say, well, okay, well, what if, you answered a question earlier, how willing would you be? What if you knew that people were going to do the cleanliness, the social distancing, et cetera? Would it make a difference? And it makes some difference. It just didn't make that much. It took us from a 32 to all the way up to a 42. Which that number is down, somewhat from last time as well.
Yeah. Again, and that was said, I know in other conversations before, but the thing is, even if the venue does follow it, does the crowd follow it? Do the people follow it? I manage a baseball team with 12 kids. We're 4 parents, and that's hard to just make them sure they keep the distance. So imagine if you have 50, 200, or 2,000 people. That's more to me what would be worrisome.
Right. Absolutely. We asked the question, what about live events that are outdoors, like gardens or zoos, or that don't require people to be seated next to each other, like maybe a museum or an aquarium? And this number actually got up into the mid 60s, I think 2 or 3 surveys ago, and it's down to 53. Still a better number, but this number is not going up by any means. I guess one of the things we can talk about, Vincent, is should people be this reticent about these kinds of settings or not? We can get into that perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's less transmission outdoors, but depends how you pack people together, right? If it's a football game, I think it's almost like being inside,
Yeah. Yeah.
screaming people right next to each other.
We asked a new question
Hmm.
because I think this is a request. We asked people how willing you would be to wear a mask or a face covering during an event, including before and after the show, the walking in, the walking out, all those opportunities. And we got an 86 overall answer. So people could say like, definitely would be 100. No way I'm putting it on would be the 0. So this is a pretty high number, I think. But I think again, it's not so much the average as it is what number of people would refuse. And as you said, Eric, how do you manage that, live at the venue?
Exactly. It's a great number. I think it's encouraging because I would not have expected to see something that high. The
Is,
moment
uh,
you sell beer stuff at concessions, if people are drinking, you take off the mask. So I'm wondering if people are really aware that they can't drink, or they should be in a special area. 2 hours, 90 minutes is long to stay with a mask. So, but it's
you,
encouraging.
you have this broken down by city?
I could do, but we didn't map that out. If we can certainly get that data if people are interested in where the good places and the not so good places are in terms of this. Yeah, we didn't run that though separately. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like that this is one of those things where if you had 10% of people who just wouldn't do it, it would be a big enough problem to kind of crater the the effectiveness of it. So, but we'll talk more about this. And then our last one, which we do to make ourselves feel a little bit better, is we ask people how much are you looking forward to being able to go back to events, sports, and entertainment, arts, etc. again in the future. And we got the highest number ever, 85. So we're happy. We're happy with that. We're happy that people are even more enthusiastic than before about getting back into the venue, which is your point, Eric.
That's positive. That's good to know.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll just go back to the camera. Let's see if exit there. I'm not sharing anymore. Am I? Okay. Looks good. All right. So let's see. What comes to mind for you guys? Where should we start? I mean, I think one of the things that I was hoping we could get was from Dr. Raccaniello was just your new and updated take on where we are with the pandemic, and then we'll go from there, I think.
Yeah, so last time I was here, it was May, I expressed some optimism that, we could depress the number of outbreaks and then we'd hit the warm and humid weather in much of the country and that would further impact transmission. But what we ran into, we did a pretty good job in most parts of the country at, flattening the curve, right? But then we got to Memorial Day weekend. And in many states, California, Texas, Arizona, Florida, southern states, everybody went outside without masks. And that started a whole new round of transmission, which is where we're in today. And that's a good lesson. It tells us that we have to be careful for a long time. And you need to wear face masks, which is still not universally done. You need to keep distance. And, many restaurants and bars opened up, and they shouldn't have. Here in New York, we're doing a pretty good job at keeping the case numbers down because you can't go inside a restaurant or a bar, right? You have to either take out or sit outside, and you have to wear face masks. It's still a requirement in public. So what we've learned is that you have to do these things for the future, and that's the way to keep the number of transmissions down. But I think, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, speaking of the outdoor dining thing, is that safe? I mean, is it feasible it seems like there's still risk there, a substantial risk there. Is it a wise policy even to have outdoor dining?
I think it's an experiment. I think if you keep the tables far apart, first of all, the servers have to be face masked for sure, right? But then the people at in the tables, of course, have to take them off to eat. And so the tables need to be far enough apart. And I've seen enough restaurants with outdoor seating to see that, you need at least 6 feet, some of them more. And, whether it's economically feasible or not, who knows? Mm-hmm. So whether it's safe, I don't know of any extensive transmission outdoors. Mostly it's inside. So I think that's an experiment worth doing for sure.
You mentioned before, though, that if you put, and I'm a LA Rams fan, football fan. I got a message from them just yesterday saying, not having fans at our games this year. Um, but you just mentioned a few minutes ago that in a football game, that kind of setting, it's just as dangerous as being inside.
I think a football game is crazy because not only are you packed next to each other, thousands and thousands of people, but they're all screaming
Yeah.
and yelling and exhaling breath, which is probably escaping around the masks, right? And then, they're going to come off at some point. So I think that's a high risk event. It's all about managing risk, right? And that one is high as opposed to sitting at tables quietly, right? 6 feet apart. That's a lower
Right.
risk operation.
So if people start getting into shouting matches at the outdoor restaurants, then we're back into
That's
danger.
right. Yeah, I ordered that.
Yeah, just don't go to dinner with Eric because it always ends in shouting. But I'm just kidding. Actually, we got a question from Simon, who I think is thinking about the various risk factors that you might have to control for it. And the question is the virus transmissible through your eyes? And is that a high risk factor? How should you think about that from a practical point of view in the venue? So masks is one thing, but if you need to goggle up as well?
No, I don't think so. So, I mean, theoretically, you should be able to get infected, but we have seen in a number of locales where face mask wearing, keeping the eyes open, really reduces transmission. So I think the eye is, if anything, is a minor route. So I'm not worried about, I would say if you're in a medical profession, right, and you're seeing patients every day, you're likely to get droplets in your eyes. Then you have to wear a face shield, but not for us, no.
Got it. Eric, what's on your mind about this? What do you think? What do you think we ought to be, I guess, just doing in preparation for this long period of time where we're going to have to be careful?
Yeah, and people have been quite creative. Those drive-in concerts, those web retransmissions, or those live events you could attend online. Of course, it's not the real thing. It does, though, keep for artists the opportunity to keep contact with their audiences, but it's just not the same thing. So there will be, unfortunately, we were hoping that this first wave would flatten out and we could restart activities, but as we're seeing, it seems we're going into the worst case scenario where it's going to be easily January, if not even next summer, where we're going to be able to attend some events. On one side, I'm seeing attractions reopen, so museums, exhibits. It's easier to keep certain form of social distancing in those. So if you haven't been in a museum in a while, now's the time to go and visit, support your local organizations. In terms of touring is going to be difficult because you're having this team of 20, 30 people going from one city to another, potentially a hotspot, then come to your venue, come and potentially infect your own staff. So touring productions, I think, are going to be on the hold for a longer time, especially international touring. Imagine with all the different countries and all the different legislations and set of rules they'll put about confinement. I mean, you just think if you're doing one night stands and you need to do a 14-day confinement, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't work. That math doesn't
When
work.
venues reopen, when it's safe to do so, maybe it'll be more local artists that will, your local comedian or your local theater group. I'm seeing that that's going to be the first things that are likely to reopen on the live entertainment side.
Vincent, this whole thing about big indoor spaces like a museum or, a lot of times like an aquarium with a high ceiling or something like that, or even a big theater. Obviously, if you put a bunch of people in there, that's one thing. But does the volume of air in a big building make it less likely for transmission to occur? It seems like it might, especially if the air was moving around.
Yeah, but I think most of the transmission is short range, within 6 feet or so. There are some exceptions where we see some longer range transmission. So in that case, it might make a difference. But I think if you keep people apart with face masks in those indoor settings, you can do it. The problem is when you sit them all, like in a theater, if you sit right next to each other for extended periods
Yeah.
and you can't move around, that's the problem.
So Lindsay makes a comment that I think is just alternately infuriating, and I don't even know what to say. She says that those of us in North Carolina, not that Lindsay has infuriated me, the comment that she's pointing out infuriates me. Those of us in North Carolina, South Carolina, where I'm from, Georgia and Florida are definitely having a different experience than people up north, and I assume she means elsewhere as well. For one thing, we're legally barred here in Georgia from requiring face coverings if our venues or orgs are partly or fully dependent on government funding. I don't even know like where to start with the insanity of that.
I just think, as a Canadian, so I just think it's sad that this becomes a political discussion versus a health and general public discussion. That's my 2 cents reading the papers every day. I mean, I had to get adjusted to wearing a mask. I need to wear it in the bus. Is it fun? No. But if I want my business to get back as soon as possible, if I want to put, I need to contribute positively to this. I need to show an example on that. I think it's sad that people are arguing about what is just common sense. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Canadians always calm. I know. I love that. But you're right. It shouldn't be. It's about science and health, not politics. It's crazy that it's gotten to this point, but that's where we are. It's about saving lives, not your right whether to wear a mask. Just like you have to wear a seatbelt and have be over 21 to drink and so forth. It's just another regulation, and I don't get it either.
Yeah, I mean, it's even more compelling than the seatbelt law because you're not so much endangering your own life
Yeah.
as you are endangering the lives of others. But Rebecca I think this is really one for you, Eric, because I know there's been some crazy situations in your years, especially running tours. Considering how dangerous unmasked shouting can be, any advice for our patron-facing staff when we reopen, how they can deal with people who won't comply with either masking or distancing or whatever? It's a very big issue, right? Like it's one of the most, I think people feel it more in this kind of group, feel it more than almost any other issue, very, very personally. Like we're going to have to really have these challenging conversations with people. What have you learned over the years about that kind of thing?
It's always difficult, and in this case, it's a health issue. Sometimes it's just we used to think no photography or no recording was important. Now we're talking actually about health reasons. I think it needs to be dealt, from the top, from the moment you interact with the client, from the moment they purchase, from the disclaimers. Of course, there's always going to be a minority that's, oh, I haven't seen it, I haven't read it, but you can buy this ticket only if you consent to do that. And, you can't tolerate, if someone was taking a picture, you go and tell them, stop. But you can't tolerate someone taking their mask off. It's hard. I hate the whole policing aspect of it. But again, we're not talking about just taking a simple picture of recording. We're talking about health. And if we want to reopen, and people are showing they want to come back to events, it's good that they're inclined to wear a mask. Let's surf on that, but let's be really rigid about others saying.
I'm curious I think that people who are either running venues or they're managing front of house staff would really benefit from, give me 1, 2, 3 things that I can put into the training or the instruction to the front of house staff about dealing with these, icky situations where you're policing people, because really nobody wants to do that, but it's just necessary in this case.
It is, and over communicate. Put it everywhere. It's every single step of the process. You buy is because by buying, we have all those disclaimers in place. I mean, we just need to change the text that by buying, you are agreeing to terms and conditions, which include coming to our venue with a mask and following a certain protocol. you recommunicated with your follow-up emails or your event reminder emails. You communicated before they enter the venue with signs inside the venue. There are extra costs with that, but I think it needs to be as clear as possible. There'll always be, again, a few rebels, but at least if you mention it, you can remove them afterwards, even if it's not a fun thing to do.
Tiffany points out that she's been yelled at for carding people in the past. So,
yeah, and again, I understand. It's never easy. People are in a mood. They're coming in. They're excited. They may have drank before. It's never easy to deal with patrons on the spot. I've done it for several years, but usually, again, before was don't take pictures.
Right. The stakes are lower for sure.
Take your hat off because the patron in the back can't see you, can't see the stage. This time you really have a health imperative right in front.
Yeah.
To me, that's the line where it doesn't become really something you can discuss about.
Yeah. Heather asked a question, and then actually Cara answered it. Heather asked if there are legitimate reasons for people not to wear masks, right? Like, is there such a thing as a legitimate reason? And then Cara said it's important to note that the ADA doesn't guarantee anybody the right to not wear a mask. Vincent, do you know anything about the sort of, I guess, legal or medical side of that issue?
Yeah, there are medical reasons. Yes, you can have a medical reason not to wear a mask, and that's completely valid. You can have difficulty breathing if you're asthmatic or have serious breathing problems and so forth. There are exceptions, but they're very rare, and most people will not have them for sure.
But people could make a rather spurious claim, that they the point is that it's possible that someone could have a legitimate thing.
Yep.
So, the thing though, if you are asthmatic, is it a good idea to go in a crowd right now, especially that you're part of the population that's more at risk?
Yeah.
Anyway.
This issue of wearing masks, we had an airline pilot write into my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said, we require masks on our flights, but if someone takes it off, we don't want to get into a fight. So we take their name and we don't let them on future flights. And that's their solution, because he said in an airplane at 38,000 feet, you don't want to have a fight.
Yeah, that doesn't usually end in happiness. Paul asked a really interesting question. This is sort of in the audio. This is sort of in the non-fan based setting, without fans. Singing, no mask, closest person 20 feet away. Only other people present are 2 or 3 technicians. 40-foot ceiling room with good ventilation. How risky? I think
it's a low risk situation. Yeah, 20 feet away with masks is fine. If the problem is if you're next to each other, that's the high risk. But
yeah, very good. This is okay. Samantha, who's going to be a junior in high school this year, says most of the people that she goes to school with are just throwing big parties. Her mom is immunocompromised and she doesn't want to put her at higher risk. One of my friends is trying to get me to get my ears pierced with her. Is there any scientific evidence that I can tell her on why it isn't a good idea due to the fact that the number of cases are skyrocketing in Arizona? Oh my God, I think there is.
I mean, that's a perfect situation for transmission. When you have lots of local cases, it's likely that anyone is infected, and they may not even be sick, right? So your friend could be sick and infect you. And so you don't want to, because you have a mom in that situation, you do not want to take that chance. That's a valid reason.
If anybody has a link that maybe Samantha, I really appreciate that you're here and when you're watching and you're listening. If anybody has a link that she could possibly share that sort of speaks to that issue, please drop it in there or give it to us and we'll share it later, because I obviously want to help there. Okay. Let's see. I think Christy had a clarifying question on the ADA thing. A guest can have a legit medical reason to not wear a mask, but the ADA doesn't require venue to allow those people inside without one. Is that a correct way of looking at it? I'm not an expert on ADA. I don't know that any of us are. Cara does answer it saying the ADA doesn't provide a blanket exemption to people with disabilities from complying with legitimate safety requirements necessary for safe operations. So I think probably the wrong group of us to opine on that one, but it sounds like That's a good answer. Vincent, last time we talked, you also gave us your perspective on treatments, vaccines, and other forms of, less about stopping it and more about ameliorating the harm from it. Where are we now on that? Like, what's your take on that?
So vaccines are in development. We have a number in the U.S. alone that are being accelerated. We have six different programs where the U.S. has funded vaccine development ahead of time. Even though the trials are in progress, we don't know if the vaccines are going to actually work, but they will have billions of doses ready by December in case they do work. So they're taking a financial risk, but it's worth it. And so they're in people right now, so we'll know by the end of the year if they work. And then if they do, they can be distributed. So that's good news. The antivirals is going more slowly. There have been a few that have been tried, but they're not really helpful in very sick people. I mean, those are the patients we want to get to treat, right? But the problem is once you go to the hospital, because you can't breathe, you're actually beyond the point where inhibiting the virus is going to do any good. Now, the good news there is that doctors have learned how to take care of these patients. They've learned techniques and certain medications like anti-inflammatories and simple things like putting you on your belly instead of on your back that lets you breathe easier, and they can save lives. So that's all good news. And in fact, now, even though the number of infections in the U.S. is about 60,000 cases a day, the deaths aren't going up. So perhaps that's a good part of that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's promise in that work in terms of at least abating the damage.
I mean, I think ultimately the vaccines will be the savior unless we want to wear face masks and stay apart from each other forever, and we don't want to do that. So I think the vaccines will come through next year, but don't expect them this year, because even if we do have hundreds of millions of doses ready by January, getting them to people is no trivial thing. They all have to be injected for the most part, so it's going to take time. So I think that will help us, and at some point next year we'll have some antivirals as well. But I do think in the meantime, the measures we've been talking about really help. And if I could, I do think we're overlooking testing. Last time we talked, the testing was mainly PCR based, which means nucleic acid detection using complicated, expensive equipment.
Right.
It takes many days. It's $100 a pop. But now we know you can develop a daily $1 a test strip that you just put some saliva on. It will tell you in 15 minutes whether you're infected or not. This has the potential to revolutionize the pandemic because we can check everyone every day. Kids going back to school, we could check them in the morning. If you're positive, you stay home for 10 days or whatever it is. You could even think about it in your venues as well. So we're trying to get some effort forward to get companies to make this, because the uptake is very slow because the other assays are entrenched. I would recommend everyone go to my last week's podcast with Michael Minna. It is a game changer when he talks about this idea of cheap, rapid testing.
So this is going to be done. This is a buildable
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. It can be done. It's just a matter of getting millions of test strips manufactured. I'm sure we could do that here.
Billions.
Billions, sure.
Yeah, billions. But so the idea would be you do this test every day, it takes 5 seconds, and then you find out very quickly, and then you base your day on whether you're positive or negative. And if everybody does that, then we just instantly kind of get our arms around who's sick and who's not.
And the thing, it turns out also, which is amazing, is that you're only actually transmitting for about 7 days in this infection. So you're positive one morning, you stay home for a week.
Yeah, okay.
And so it really is a game changer. And we have to get behind this. And the FDA is not, the White House is not, but we need to make noise and tell them they should be on it.
I mean, it seems like the most obvious thing in the world. If it can be done, it just seems like we'd get a perfect picture of what's going on. So let's talk about the 7-day thing for a second. And somebody asked a herd immunity question. Maybe you can sort of lump that in with the answer. But the 7-day thing, so we know that you can potentially transmit it when you don't have symptoms, but it sounds like it's kind of centered on the period when you do, maybe a plus or minus on either side of it.
So what happens is you're infected, you have an incubation period, and then the day before you feel symptoms of some kind, the virus is now high enough to be transmitted. And then a day after symptoms, it peaks. So you're transmitting really effectively. Just a day after you've got your first cough or fever, whatever. And then it's down to non-transmissible within 7 days, maybe even sooner. And so that's the window, that 8-day window around symptom onset where we have to worry about people, not in the end, not in the beginning. And that's what PCR picks up, those fringes. It doesn't matter. It turns out it doesn't matter. We've just begun to realize that. Make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, it again, it's kind of like we've been able to put, more and more sort of brackets around where the problem really is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even really that complicated to know what to do. And Tiffany's expressing a frustration that I think all of us have, which is if we want to sort of make noise, as you say, how in the world do we do that, right? It doesn't feel like there's a lot of response on any of the levers that we might be pushing right now. I mean, in some places it is, but
Let me make a suggestion. So we've been discussing this with Michael Minna, who's devised these assays. He was on my podcast last week, episode 640.
there's a link in the chat for everybody who wants to.
Micro.tv. And we are now getting letters from listeners which are designed to send to your elected officials, your company presidents, and so forth. I'm going to be sharing them on the website, and people can adapt them as needed. Send them to your senators, representatives, CEOs, whoever you can think of, your friends. Share them on social media. This has to get amplified so they see, oh, we have to do this. This is
so we will share all of that in the Facebook group, the Show Up Facebook group. And what you could do if you have a mailing list, if this is appropriate for your venue or whatever, your staff, your professional groups, or possibly even your customer groups, is share those with them and ask them to do that action if you think that you can, or there's an outlet there. Eric, when people are you're in the ticketing services business now, including consulting to people who tour, what kind of advice are you giving them right now about looking toward the future?
Well, right now, business model will have to change. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Touring itself, I mean, if you're looking at touring a property, it'll be 12 months, 6 months minimum, probably more. In terms of more for venues, again, I think when you can reopen, when it's safe to do so, monitor what's going on. For those that are having those customer services, they should be really adamant about it, maintain the hard line on that. Change maybe your policies if you want to get people to commit to purchasing by being more flexible. So do help people by, if you're sick, you'll get a refund. Don't come, you don't force people to come.
Yeah.
Follow the health safety directions that are being given out. And I think, touring properties that may be able to start touring maybe are things like with longer runs, longer spans. So if they need to do that isolation, it'd be 14 days. Those will make sense to restart maybe earlier. But again, the thing you want to avoid is carrying that hot spot or going from one to a cold spot, and just that's the whole transmission part. And the touring thing is, it's traveling stopped. There's a reason for that. And unfortunately, the live entertainment part is a bit on hold. If you're a venue, focus on local acts. There's a lot of waiting that's going to need to be done. But if you can have events that are being safe, do them, even if they don't necessarily generate profit. Keep your staff working, keep your people working. The sad thing that I'm seeing is in the industry, there's so much that's being shut down completely that people are applying for other types of jobs now. So the live entertainment industry, it's crazy seeing all those talented people that right now are looking for a way out of the industry. Be great if governments on either side of the border could help the entertainment industry a little bit more. At least the people, the workers. I'm not talking about rich artists. I'm talking about those people working in venues and those ticketing people, those production people, that there's something that keeps them involved, because we're going to lose so much expertise. I'm looking on LinkedIn every day, seeing some of my old colleagues that are out of work now, just starting to apply or finding new jobs. Good for them. They need to feed themselves,
Yeah.
but they're just getting out of live entertainment. And I think that is sad. So if you do have a way to keep people working, even if it's not profitable, but you're not necessarily operating it as a loss, go ahead. Just make sure that it's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Rhonda says that half the venue she worked at was laid off, including her. And she's trying to imagine, is it November? Is it December? Is it, what's a realistic timeline? And I guess we'll see, but it's not next month, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, if you're optimistic, maybe November, December, start programming events, but don't spend too much ahead. Make sure that your policies are flexible. So if you need to change your event, if you need to reschedule it, that it can move. But then that part becomes tricky as well. I mean, with all the artists that cancel tours, everyone's on hold. There's this bunch of shows that need to be rescheduled. So even when things reopen, there's so many events that need to be rescheduled that it's going to be months before everything scheduling becomes, flowing again. So
yeah. But that'll be a good problem, is when there's so many shows to get on the schedule that we just can't organize it all. So, Vincent, I have one more question before we end, which is somewhat related to it's usually a live entertainment form. Are you familiar with the NBA's bubble? The bubble that the NBA has created? So the NBA is going to play a season delayed from March that starts next week, and they've taken all the teams that are still in contention for the championship, moved them into Walt Disney World. They're limiting contact with the outside world dramatically, testing players on an almost daily basis. If you test positive, you're out. And they're going to play their intention is to play a full season. No fans, obviously, just for broadcast. Is that a sane plan? Was that going to work, do you think, in terms of keeping most people healthy and being able to actually have that content created?
So let me understand. They're going to play in different venues or in the same venue? They're
going to play, I think it's one of maybe two venues. They're not going, the teams are going to stay there the entire season. So you could opt out of the season if you're a player, but most of the players have said, sure, I'll do it. Right. So,
I think they're managing the risk by daily testing. That's really the key, because as soon as someone's positive, they go, and they're not going to infect anyone else. And how that's managed depends on their contact with other people. Basketball players are going to want to go out and do other things, and they may get infected, but we'll pick it up within a day. So I think that's a good plan. Daily testing is really the key. If we could do that, solves a lot of problems.
Yeah. Actually, that's one of the takeaways for me from this, is that if it's possible to create these inexpensive, fast daily tests, we'd have a clear picture right away, and you'd be able to. You don't have to overcompensate in terms of people staying home and closures and everything else as much to get to the right answer. Well, guys, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Great conversation. I really enjoyed everybody in the group who not only listened but also contributed in so many ways. We will share anything we miss, by the way. Let us know on the Facebook group. If you're not already part of it, go to Show Up on Facebook and join it. And that way, when we post information, you'll get it. But if we miss anything that you heard us say we would link to, let us know in the next day or two, and we'll make sure and get it. We'll put in links to what Eric's working on now, and of course to Dr. Raccaniello's podcast, and whatever else came up today that I missed. But you guys, thanks a lot. This has been great. Really useful all across the board.
And my pleasure.
My pleasure, Jim. Thanks for having me.
You got it. All right. Well, we'll have you guys back, obviously, when we can. And thanks again, Eric, Vincent, everybody who's followed us and joined in today. We'll see you next time. We'll have new data. We'll have new guests. It'll be great. Talk to you then. Bye. Crachez-vous dessus, il est encore temps.